Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be talking about some bounce back players to draft at a discount. In this episode, we're going to be talking about auction values and for players that we think could have a better 2025 and you'll be getting them for a discount. So we got 3 players each. Joe, why don't you give us the first one?
All right, first player we're going to go with here. We're going to start off with quarterback Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys, and think he's going to have a bounce back year this year. You know, every year that Dak has been able to stay healthy and play all the games, you know, he's essentially been a top 5 fantasy quarterback. Obviously, last year he had the injury, shortened season, but you know, I think with the addition of George Pickens to this offense, obviously CeeDee Lamb on the outside. Talked about it before. I'm expecting the Cowboys defense to really not be good. This Cowboys offense also has the potential to be similar to the Cincinnati Bengals situation of last year. Defense not being very good. Bengals did have a decent run game, but found themselves down in games, so forced into the pass. That's where Dallas isn't going to have a run game this year. I mean, they got, unless Jaden Blue maybe surprises and does well, but he's not the body type to carry a big workload. And mostly I expect him to be doing stuff out of the backfield there. So I think, you know, this is one of the first times, too, Dak Prescott's had 2, you know, George Pickens probably one of the best wide receiver 2s that he's had on this offense. Obviously, you know, with Amari Cooper there, it was a different story. But with Pickens and CeeDee Lamb, I think he's set up for some decent success here.
You know, I never thought I'd see the day where you were gassing up Prescott because of George Pickens. I feel like you were ready to be done with George Pickens altogether, and now you are singing his praises right now.
Well, a lot of that, like I said, it was never denying the talent and stuff that he had. I just was more so, you know, the playing with the Steelers in that offense and their lack of, you know, quarterbacks and everything else that I just didn't trust.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this for the record. I do agree with you, and I think you are getting him at a discount right now based on the ESPN cheat sheet here. He's only going for $2. I mean, that's a great value. I just, if you look at how he's performed, obviously the injury riddle season was a bummer. Before that, quarterback 3, he's been the quarterback 8, the quarterback 2, so he's capable. So for $2 with the upside in this offense, I think it makes a lot of sense. I could see a scenario. I just, looking into the future where George Pickens slams his helmet on the ground in frustration because Dad can't get him the ball, and the Cowboys become the soap opera, and things just really fall off the tracks. It could happen. I don't think it will, but it could.
Yeah, I mean, as long as Jerry Jones is at the helm, they're always going to be a soap opera / circus there in Dallas. But you know, to clarify what I was alluding to, pretty much every year that Dak Prescott's at least played 16 games, all but one year he wasn't, you know, a top 12 quarterback in a QB1. Essentially, there was one year in 2018 he played 16 games, but he was the QB 14 on the season.
So first guy I'm going to be talking about here. And, we'll see if I'm right or wrong about this based on some recent news. But I'm going on a whim here and going with wide receiver Jaylen Waddle as a bounce back. And the reason why I said maybe is recently, Mike McDaniel, head coach, came out and said that Waddle had an undisclosed injury and was held out. So, it seems like it was minor. Who really knows what exactly it was? I'm not that worried about it. It's not. I don't think it's one of those injuries situations where it's like, okay, like a Kenneth Walker type of thing. I'm a little more worried about. But you look at a guy like Jaylen Waddle, he's only going for $10 right now. I mean, I think that's a really good value. We don't really know what Tyreek Hill is going to be in this offense. There's been a lot of drama over the offseason. And if you look in 2022, he was the wide receiver 8. He had 117 targets, 75 catches, almost 1,400 yards and 8 touchdowns. Since then, he's been wide receiver 34 and wide receiver 46. Primarily is because he hasn't been able to stay healthy. The other thing is he just wasn't getting as many touchdowns. So the guy's only 26 years old still. He's been in the NFL for 4 years. I think this is, a possibility for him to have a bounce back. I kind of like the upside at $10. Honestly, you may even be able to get him for less. I don't know how many people really are that excited about Jaylen Waddle.
Yeah, I don't know how much excitement there is for him either. I think people are I think people have been burnt possibly enough by Jaylen Waddle, and just he's always had the upside there because of his skill set and his ability, and he's shown those flashes, I think, enough to intrigue people. But the injury issues also, maybe people are worried about, can Tua actually stay healthy? I mean, obviously that's a huge part to Jaylen Waddle. Can both of those guys stay healthy? But I think it's interesting, like people have been down on, T. Higgins in years past because he's another guy who just can't play all the 17 games. Then he has the season he did. Once again, didn't play a full season, but now we see his value, skyrocket up over $30 on the ESPN cheat sheet, where he's the guy that people are drafting in the teens last year.
Yeah, well, and I will say, I want to go back to a point you made. If Quinn Ewers is the quarterback, there's going to be problems. I mean, the guy couldn't hit a broadside of a barn in a preseason game. I guess, it would be Zach Wilson, but he hasn't been much better in his career. So, if Tua's not able to play, the whole this thing is burning down.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a risky thing, not only when you got to worry about Tua's health and not only Jaylen Waddle's health there. All right, so the next player I'm going to go with here is going to be tight end Evan Engram of the Denver Broncos. Go ahead, Steve. You want to call me a homer here?
I was gonna. I called it. It was coming up. I was like Homer. But I was like, no, I'm just gonna let him talk.
All right, perfect. So I was ready for the homer call. It didn't happen this time, but I think Evan Engram definitely is in for a bounce back year this year. Broncos signed him there for a reason. Sean Payton really believes that he's going to be the joker of this offense. You really need a guy that can push it down the field in the middle of the field there. I think that's exactly what they brought in Evan Engram to do. And before last year, where he had the shoulder issues, 2022 he finished as the tight end 5. 2023 he was the tight end 2. Now I don't think he's going to amass like necessarily those many targets that he did in those years, but if you look at it in those years, his yards per catch the last 2 years were 7.7 and then 8.5 essentially the year before when he was a tight end 2. And I think we're going to see those jumpers, jump up to maybe where you saw it in 2022 where he was at the 10.5. I think Broncos are going to try to get it down more, hit him more down the field than those short targets that Trevor Lawrence has been giving him the past couple of years. And currently, he's listed as tight end 9 and going for $4 in your auction leagues. And I think, that's a decent price just to bet on his upside and possibly the upside of the Broncos offense.
So this is going to be this is a very interesting test case here, because I remember watching some of the Broncos games with you last year, Joe. And I think one of the biggest knocks for the offense, and I would say somewhat of a critique, and I think you would agree, was there was a lot of plays behind the line of scrimmage, and there weren't a lot of plays where they were driving the ball down the field, both throwing it, 10 to 15 plus yards. Now, towards the end of the season, we started to see more of that. But I think early on, I even remember hearing you being like, how are we not pushing the ball down the field? So I do think that the addition of Evan Engram, I think they want to do that. So will it end up being that 10.4, yards per catch that you were talking about in 2022, or is it going to be more towards that 8.45? That's where I don't know. It will be a question of, does the offense take another step in progression and they bring in a guy like Engram that allows them to do that? Or will he maybe get more targets and have less? I kind of feel like it's not going to be as high as you're saying. I think it's going to be maybe 9, maybe not as low as the 8. But I was curious what you're going to say. I don't think he's going to get the target volume that he did. That's a for certain. I would say I wouldn't be surprised if Engram finishes as like the tight end, like 6 or 7. I don't see him being in the top 3. But definitely a bounce back from what happened last year.
Yeah. I mean, he played 9 games and was tight end 33. I would agree. I'm not expecting him to jump all the way up to be the tight end 3 on the season, but definitely think there's, I think really the tight end 4 overall in fantasy here is up for grabs, and I could see him being in the top 5 when all said is done here.
I think so. The only thing is that will he be dependent on touchdowns, or will he get those larger chunk gains? I'm not convinced that right out of the gate, Sean Payton's going to be swinging, and they're going to be doing plays, scheming plays for 15, 20-yard chunk plays throwing down the field. It wasn't the offense last year. Again, maybe as far as the maturation process of the offense, it becomes that, but I'm not as convinced.
Yeah, I think it definitely can become that. I mean, Bo's in his second year. He's already saying how much, he's moving faster, operating faster. He said he was like, he had memorized the plays, but didn't exactly understand the plays and how to apply them to defenses last year. And he still finished the second half of the year really strong, not only in the actual season, but for fantasy. So we'll see. But even in the years that Evan Engram was the tight end 2 and tight end 5, he only had 4 touchdowns those years.
Yeah. This sounds like a little like hope to me. And hope could very well turn out the way you do, but I could see us in a few weeks here after week 1 or week 2, or after I watch some of the games of you being like, what are they doing? Why aren't they throwing it down the field? They keep doing this dink and dunk stuff. Like why aren't they pushing it down the field?
Let's be honest. I mean, Sean Payton loves his screens. Those aren't going to go away. But heck, maybe Engram gets some of those tight end screens because he's possible. An athletic guy that we haven't had on the offense, in Denver. So
Greg Dulcich was pretty athletic.
Yeah, but he couldn't stay healthy. So we didn't even really get to see Greg Dulcich, and that's not a Sean Payton guy. I mean, we've seen, guys like Jimmy, guys like Jimmy Graham have been able to do in the Sean Payton offense.
Fair enough. All right, so my next player here that I think is going to be an interesting bounce back that I think you can get at a discount is wide receiver DK Metcalf of the now Pittsburgh Steelers. Last year he finished as a wide receiver 32, was the second worst that he's ever done. Only time it was worse was his rookie year, where he was wide receiver 34. So now he goes into an offense where I just think the target share percentage could just be like outlandish. He's only going for $15 right now. Aaron Rodgers in the past, if he has a favorite target, he tends to hyper target, whether it was in Green Bay and Devontae Adams, whether it was Garrett Wilson prior to the point of Devontae Adams getting traded. There just really isn't another receiver of DK's stature on the roster. I mean, they've got guys like Robert Woods or Roman Wilson or, people like that, which they could, maybe have some sort of impact. But DK's the guy. Like, there's really nothing else. I mean, they're running like 3 tight end sets. I think there was a 4 tight end set with no running back. Yeah. I mean, it's like Rodgers, I think, is going to hyper target DK. I mean, they've been doing a lot of, practices together. Based on what we know of Rodgers, this is what he's done in the past. So I wouldn't be shocked if we're seeing a very high target percentage for DK.
Yeah, I'm curious because, DK doesn't exactly fit the archetype and prototype of player that has done well with Aaron Rodgers. He's not Devontae Adams.
What about Jordy Nelson, though?
I mean, possibly Jordy Nelson.
I mean, I feel like Jordy Nelson wasn't a huge route runner. He was more kind of tall and kind of was given these jump passes and stuff like that.
Sure. I mean, he was burning guys deep down the field, but I do think Nelson was probably a better route runner than we're remembering. But specifically with a Devontae Adams, he's an extremely great route runner. Even he had a lot of frustrations with Garrett Wilson when he first arrived with the Jets because they weren't on the same page. Wilson wasn't running the routes the way he wanted them, and that's part of the problem. DK is not really that guy. And maybe like you said, maybe they'll get on the same page here. They've had their private workouts and the training camp to do so. I'm not sure if they're actually going to get any preseason time in as they didn't play in week 1. But to where maybe that favors somebody else. But I mean, on paper, it does look like obviously DK is the most reliable wide receiver they have on the roster.
I think DK could get a lot of red zone looks too.
He definitely could. I mean, unless they target the tight end position. I mean, they got Jonnu Smith, and then Washington's absolutely huge, and I could see. I mean, he'd be a great red zone.
It's possible, but again, look in the past. when has Rodgers ever really primarily used a tight end other than maybe Jermichael Finley? Like, what tight end has
Yeah.
actually done anything with Rodgers? Just doesn't typically use the tight end position. I would think it'd be Jonnu, because Jonnu is this like hybrid guy.
Right.
It's not. He's an eight. I don't know. To me, like,
I
I
mean, I
feel
feel
like
like that's kind of, Jermichael Finley was a very athletic guy. He was, I feel like, kind of that similar type guy. He was a very yards after catch guy, kind of like Jonnu Smith is.
yeah. So I mean, like, I don't know. I unless Rodgers just falls off a cliff and this team is horrible, which could I mean, to me, that's the most likely outcome of DK failing and not working out. Is that the offense is an absolute just dumpster fire, and as a
Yeah.
result, nobody's relevant, and the whole offense you just don't want any part of, which could very well be the case.
Yeah. But either way, I do think the value is there for DK, and he'd be worth a shot because, Rodgers is going to have to throw it to somebody. And if he does, return those touchdown numbers that he had earlier in his career, I mean, that'll definitely help DK finish more so, towards the top 20 wide receiver area versus in the 30s where he has been lately. All right. So my last guy I'm going to go with here, Steve, is sticking with the tight end position. Going to be tight end Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys, another Dallas Cowboy player. But I just think, as I talked about Dak Prescott, I think we're going to want pieces in this passing attack, not necessarily the running backs. I'm not sure how valuable those are going to be, but, Jake Ferguson's a guy, 2023. He was a tight end 9 in PPR, played 14 games last year. Obviously, Dak also went down, didn't get to play all of his games with Dak, ultimately finished as a tight end 25 on the season. But as we said before, other than the big three, George Kittle, Trey McBride, even Brock Bowers at the number 1 spot. Like outside of those top 3 guys, tight end position is, we've known it's a crapshoot. It's really up for grabs. Jake Ferguson, I could see him coming back with a strong season. And I think having, once again, George Pickens as that wide receiver 2, drawing more coverage to the outside, I think Ferguson can really attack the middle of the field this year, and return better than where his current value is sitting. Right now, ESPN's got him as the tight end 13, and he's only $1. I mean, I definitely think the guy's worth the dollar flyer. And if he's not looking good or not going to be, healthy or something, you can drop him.
Yeah, I think people forget how good Ferguson was prior to last season. And you see the Cowboys had faith in him too. I was not expecting them to give a contract extension to Ferguson because that's not been the blueprint that they've done, whether it's was it Blake Jowers? And
Blake Jarwin.
There it is. Blake Jarwin. Thank you, Joe. Blake Jarwin and
Dalton Schultz.
Dalton Schultz. There you go. Yeah, there you go. Now you're covering me here. Are you like the Cowboys your favorite team in the NFC or something?
No,
but I felt like that we were looking at the same thing with Luke Schoonmaker coming in as and poor guy. I don't really think he's gonna get the opportunity now. Now that they gave that extension to Jake Ferguson, but I agree. I mean, for practically nothing, if you're gonna punt the tight end position, he's a great one to choose.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how can you want to cover your bases? Grab Jake Ferguson, another $1 guy, and these guys all have upside, and there's room for these guys to possibly jump into the top 10 tight ends like he has before.
I mean, honestly, unless you're in a tight end premium league, I don't. And maybe this is bullish for me to say this. I don't really see the appeal to taking a tight end, one of the top 3 tight ends, and spending the money that is associated with the tight end. I think maybe Kittle I could get behind because I think Kittle's the safest. I think McBride could have, possible regression. And I also think that Bowers could too. I mean, Bowers could have a great opportunity based on the landscape of Las Vegas, but I don't know. The Chip Kelly offense, it makes me wonder if Brock Bowers will be as prominent of a role as he was before. If there was some, not to say he can't, but it's just when you have sustainability in the same coaching staff, then it's more predictable. But when it's something new, you have to factor that in. And I'm like, I don't know. Why not just spend $1 on a guy like Ferguson who has that upside and use that other money towards other player, more, whether it be a running back or receiver, those more important positions.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this year, like, unless you want to spend up for a guy in the top 3, I punt it and take flyers, on a couple of guys that are a buck and see what happens. And if it doesn't the upside doesn't happen, drop them. You only spent $1.
All right, so my last guy, and I'm a little surprised I'm even saying it, to be honest with you, but I was looking at it and I was like, this is probably a decent one. It's going to be wide receiver Stefon Diggs of the New England Patriots. He finished as the wide receiver 64 last year, partially because he only played 8 games. But prior to his ACL tear, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but he started turning it on, with, having a rapport with C.J. Stroud. He was really starting to get involved in the offense. And right now, he's only $5. He's coming off the ACL. You would have thought, and you think about a guy like Brandon Ayuk, I want to say he tore his ACL earlier than Diggs, and Diggs has been cleared and active, and Ayuk is taking him a while. So that is somewhat of a concern. But if you think that Drake May is going to take the next step, the Patriots have a bevy of receivers, or who even knows what's going to happen. You got Pop Douglas, but Pop Douglas, he doesn't even play all 3 wide receiver sets. He's not always on the field. You got a guy like Kyle Williams who's, interesting, but how much is he going to be involved? Diggs is the alpha there, and we know Diggs wants the ball. He's going to make it be known that he wants the ball. So to me, I actually think for $5, it's kind of a sneaky value. And you're getting him for a discount if he can perform the way that we know that he's used to. I mean, it's not going to be what he did with the Bills. I'm not saying that.
Right.
But he could be, I wouldn't be surprised if he can be a wide receiver too.
Yeah. I mean, the upside is there. I mean, obviously it's risky with him coming off of the injury, but I think his was pretty clean, just the ACL. I think Ayuk might have had more things wrong with the knee, and that's taken him a bit longer to recover from. But nevertheless, I mean, Diggs had 64 targets in those 8 games. I mean, pretty much averaging 8 targets a game on a Texans offense that, had Nico Collins, had Tank Dell, and as a Tank Dell owner last year, I was writing off Stefon Diggs, and then I'm like, oh, wait, Stefon Diggs is getting heavily utilized. Like, Tank Dell didn't start getting good until after Stefon Diggs got hurt and was not an option for CJ Stroud anymore. So, we talk about, good route runners. That is Stefon Diggs. He knows how to get open. He's going to be very friendly for a young wide receiver and young quarterback in Drake May, who I do believe will take the next step this year. He's going to be a very friendly face to see, as long as, he's not being a distraction on the field, getting disgruntled that he's not getting the ball. Otherwise, with his play, he'll be right on the spot where Drake May is expecting him to be.
So that does it for this episode. We went through some bounce back players that you'll be able to draft for a discount and could really help you to win your leagues. If you haven't done so already, check out our most recent episode. We asked the question, is it worth paying up? We went through a cheap versus expensive exercise where you wondered, hey, is it better to have the cheap option or the expensive? You want to check that out. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.